Well, hello everyone. I'm Tyler Chrestman, and welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. So this is a little bit of a different episode. I don't have any notes prepared or anything. I'm just gonna kind of speak off the cuff here. I was down last night at the protests here in St. Louis over the George Floyd murder. And I do use the word murder here because that cop clearly acted in a fashion that a police officer shouldn't have acted in. It looks, at least from the outset, that his actions should result in him being convicted of something. So I will go ahead and embrace the term murder for that one. You don't kneel on the back of someone's neck for 9 minutes. You just don't do it. A police officer should know better. I was down here in the middle of the protests here last night, and I like to think I was outside of the protests. I wasn't chanting, didn't bring a sign. I was down there to take pictures, talk to people, get a feel for some of the emotions on the ground more than anything else. That's what my goal was going down there last night. And I just have some thoughts that I need to get out there about protesting. Protesting is fundamental. It is fundamental to our government. It is fundamental to freedom to be able to petition the government with grievances. The idea that we are allowed to criticize the government, or well, I guess permitted, allowed. It's a right that precedes government. This idea, this fundamental right to protest. Let me move my shield. And it's hard to sort of walk this line where there's a part of me that thinks protesting is fantastic. I will always believe that. To the people who were out there yesterday protesting their beliefs, doing so in a peaceful manner, nothing but love. And I encourage this kind of conduct that leads to discussion about topics that people feel there's injustice. When you feel there's an injustice being done and you lead a movement to fight that injustice, I support you 100%. Even if I don't necessarily agree. I haven't done a podcast on George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and police brutality. I haven't done one in a little bit, and it's because my thoughts haven't changed. There is a problem with some bad cops, but I don't think it's an epidemic. So even these protests, I don't necessarily agree with the underlying cause. I'd love to talk to people about it. But when they're out there protesting, I fully support it, 100%. It's a good thing to be out there and to stand up for your beliefs. And again, even if I don't agree necessarily with the underlying reason for the protest, I'm glad that they're out there doing it. That goodwill, that charity, it disappears completely when we try and justify violence and property damage. It goes away entirely. I do not care how much righteous indignation someone has, how justified they feel in their actions. You don't burn down stores, you don't loot, and you don't hurt police. The amount of police officers who were injured in the past 48 hours it's been heartbreaking. There were 4 officers shot here in St. Louis last night. When I was down there at the protests, everything was fine. But those protests didn't stay a protest. Those protests turned into a riot. The 7-Eleven by my house was burned to the ground last night. There were fires set all up and down the street. There were people brandishing weapons. And some people in that crowd used those weapons to shoot 4 police officers. People were throwing rocks. And these aren't things that the news are reporting. These are things that I saw. People were throwing rocks at police. They were shooting fireworks at the police. They, again, were brandishing weapons in open sight of the police, which is your right to carry a weapon. But I would be very careful when brandishing weapons against law enforcement. I don't like the protesters, wherever they were, in Virginia, going into the Capitol with weapons. I thought that was ridiculous. The fact that that's not a protest to me. That's a threat. That's a veiled threat. I support people carrying firearms on their person. But when you are showing people a weapon, you are, there's a slight intimidation factor there. And I didn't support those people who did it in the Capitol building, wherever that was, in Michigan or Virginia. I honestly can't remember at the moment. And I didn't support it last night. I don't think it's a good thing. It's certainly not helping ease tensions. It is heartbreaking to watch people demonize the police. I work with the police every single day. They are the idea that the officers of the law every day get up, they put on a badge, they put on their gun, and they say to themselves, it's time to go oppress some minorities, is just absurd on its face. Most of the police officers are good, decent people, have a job. They get up, they go do that job. They protect, they serve. There are bad police officers. Absolutely. And when we find them, we need to hold them accountable for their actions. But you don't get to demonize the police. If your complaint is that the police demonize your community, which is the underlying complaint of the Black Lives Matter movement, you don't then get to demonize the police as if they do no good, as if they are more harmful than good. Explain to me what the world looks like without the police. It's not a world that I think would be safe to live in. Absolutely not. And it genuinely gets me furious when officers are harmed during these when the officers start getting harmed, it goes from protest to riot. When officers are harmed during these riots, it makes me furious. This does nobody any good. No one. Not a single person is helped by harming an officer. George Floyd, his death looks like an injustice. And there was almost universal condemnation of the officer and his action from police departments, from prominent politicians, from the general public. There, you don't find a gigantic swath of America standing up for this officer as if it was okay. You can pick out your fringe people. You can pick out your morons. The people who want to make light of it, that they don't have broad support. That officer was fired. That officer was arrested within days. What are we talking about? Why are we out here saying that the police just get away with everything? There's a history of police getting away with things. We don't live in that time anymore. We need to hold officers accountable, and that's what's being done in this case. And it was done so fast. The quickest charges are ever brought against a police officer in Minneapolis. The fastest ever. It's not good enough. We're going to have riots. We're going to shoot cops. We're going to do these different things. It's disgusting. It's terrible. And it was so heartbreaking to see. And I talked to a lot of my friends who are officers and firefighters who were on duty last night. And it's terrible. You're seeing it on the news. I personally didn't know any of the 4 officers, but I have some good friends who are good friends with them, and they're torn up today. They're mad. They're angry. The fact that a man dies, and we all grieve for that. We all think that officer who killed him needs to be held accountable. But the answer to that isn't to kill someone else. There's an officer who was shot in Las Vegas last night. He's in critical condition, might not live. And did the person who shot him just see a badge? What about his family, his wife, his children? Are they not important because that man chose to be a member of law enforcement? It is disgusting, how these things have gone recently. And again, during the day, protest. Get out there. March in the streets. But violence is not the answer. We haven't reached that point in this society. We haven't. And I will debate anyone on this topic. Anyone who thinks that we have. Who wants to attempt to justify violence. And I encourage anyone, reach out to me if you disagree. And come on the show, and let's talk about it. Because I think you need to be set straight. I think everyone does. Anyone who believes this needs to be set straight. It is heartbreaking to watch America fracture when there's not a reason for us to be split. That there's no disagreement on this topic. Even the police, who normally, the thin blue line, who normally stand together. Even police departments across the country came out and condemned this officer's actions. I don't know what we're talking about. I tried to talk to people last night and ask some simple questions and couldn't get simple answers. What are we out here for? The police don't care about black people. Why do we say that? What is our evidence for that? They're out here killing us. And then you ask them a simple question. Do you know how many people are killed by the police every year? A lot. Well, I'll tell you the answer. 250 black people are killed by the police every single year. Of those, 6% are an unarmed black male. So you're talking 6% of police killings in the country. 250 black men, I think men are people. I actually can't remember if it's men or if it's black people. I think black people in general. 250, less than one a day. There were 500 people last year killed in Chicago alone. 90-something% of them were black. What are we talking about? The idea that the police are this giant oppressive force that are out here murdering black men en masse is not supported by any data. There are no numbers that back this up. None. Period. So let's not demonize the police. If we want to talk about our police officers need more training, I agree. The overwhelming majority of these cases probably could have been solved by officers having more training. Because the other uncomfortable fact is that there are more unarmed white people killed by the police than black people. Now, in as similar, dubious of circumstance, but they don't fit the narrative of racism, so they don't get national news coverage. I encourage anyone to go look up the police in shooting the white guy in the hotel from, I think it was last year, telling him, crawl on your knees, don't fall, and he falls down, and they shoot him to death. Again, if that had been a black man in the exact same circumstance, that would have been national news coverage for forever. There would have been large-scale protests. But it wasn't. It was a white guy getting shot, so no one cared. Everyone should care anytime someone unjustly loses their life. The entire point I'm trying to make is that let's keep some things in perspective. Let's do it. Let's talk about the fact that the numbers don't support this protest. They don't. Get out there and protest all you want. Don't commit violence. Don't burn things down. Do not throw rocks at cops. Do not shoot at the police. Don't burn cars. Don't brandish weapons or hurt innocent people who have nothing to do with the protest. There's video going around of this old woman getting just savagely beaten by a group of young men who broke into her bakery. Who is that helping? And don't hide behind the fact that you're mad and therefore it justifies violence. It doesn't. It doesn't. We don't live in that society. Grow up. We don't live in a society where you can just go and hit people you don't like. That's not the world that we want to live in. I'm gonna leave it here. This is just me ranting a little bit today. I'm very upset about this entire situation. We all should be coming together right now because the people behind the protests should look around and realize that they've won already. They have public support. There's not even as someone who's more libertarian, often accused of being a conservative, all of my conservative friends, all the conservative news outlets that I follow and, things that I read, that you're not seeing people defending this officer. Even people like myself who are very pro-police. We're not defending this officer's action because people who are pro-police want bad cops held accountable. The argument's been won. The police are going to be held accountable. So why then are we taking this next step? It's just sad. It's sad all around. And I just wish we could all come together and learn from this and move forward together. It seems like a pipe dream, but that's what I would like more than anything else. That is what I would like. We're gonna leave it there. As you can tell, I'm pretty upset today about this entire thing. So we'll get back on it maybe in a couple days and do an in-depth follow-up. We'll give us some facts, some figures. We'll talk about the whole thing, but not today. Today is just a day to grieve, I guess. We're going to leave it there. I am Tyler Chrestman. Thank you for listening.